our affirmation today is, I am one with God. And we use a lot of affirmations in our fellowship, and that's a new thought belief. We affirm these statements, we make these positive statements, we send that positive energy out there into the universe, and this creates the world that we live in. This affirmation, I am one with God, is a core belief in the New Thought faith. The understanding that God, our Creator, is within us, and we in turn are a part of God. The life force energy that makes up everything in the world and the universe. To understand this tenet and New Thought a lot better, I want to give a brief history of New Thought. And I'm going to specifically focus on unity. I think they're one of the most prestigious and well-known New Thought faiths in not just the country, but worldwide today. Unity began with just two people started unity. And actually, if I walk that back a little bit, the real catalyst was one person, Myrtle Fillmore. Myrtle Fillmore had attended a lecture in Kansas City, and there was a lecturer there, and he was pretty much an unknown speaker, but he had come from a college that was organized and run by Emma Curtis Hopkins. Now, you're not going to know a lot of these names, but I'll explain it as we go on. And these are people who, by this time, and this we're talking about the mid to late 1800s, so this was some time ago. By this time, they'd become widely recognized as New Thought leaders. So this student lecturer was welcomed in this small Kansas town to give this lecture. And understand that this is happening, again, in the late 1800s. So a lot of 21st century technology archaeologists and researchers and people who could interpret old world languages weren't around then. So this thing that's happening in Kansas City in the late 1800s is sort of a standalone thing, and it's interesting that it had existed for thousands of years, and we can even move it forward to the time of Christ. If we look in the Bible, we can see all kinds of stories of Christ living and being a breathing example of the New Thought teachings. And in fact, that's part of the reason we here in our fellowship, we say that we are students of practical Christianity, because these are these Christ lessons that we're learning and using in a real modern day world setting. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore had both, all of their lives, been seekers of information, looking for a certain truth. They both grew up in very fundamental conservative faiths, and they always felt this disconnect between man and God. There was always this gap between the church and its tenets and man. So Myrtle and Charles go to this lecture, and Myrtle hears something that she hasn't before, this affirmation. It's also important to realize that Myrtle had been diagnosed, back in the 1800s, consumption was really a deadly thing. A lot of people lived lives of frailty and not very long. So she'd been given this diagnosis, and she'd lived with that all her life. That was inbred in her, that you're this frail, sick person, and you need to adjust your life, and that's how you need to live your life. So at this lecture, this speaker gives her an affirmation, and she becomes so enthralled with it. I mean, she takes it to her heart. She actually just devours it. And the affirmation that he gave all of the attendees was, I am a child of God, therefore I do not inherit illness. This just really knocked her socks off. And so she went home that night with Charles, and she said, you know what? I found my truth answer. And she began to faithfully, daily, and sometimes even hourly, she would just lock herself away in a room, and she would repeat this affirmation. She would often envision that Christ was sitting in an empty chair across from her, and they were having these healings together. Within 3 weeks' time, people noticeably saw that she was looking and feeling a lot better. Less than 3 years later, she gave birth to their third child. And actually from there, she went on to live another 50 years of a very rich and wealthy life. That was sort of the birth of unity. And as I said, her and Charles were very close, and so he got very attracted to this. And he himself was challenged because he had a hip injury as a young boy in a skating accident. And so he was also given this sort of horrible diagnosis that he would spend the rest of his life dragging around this lame leg. In this was just sort of the first thing that set them on this search to understand better about affirmations and about the fact that as you read through the Bible, you can see that we are children of God. God does not expect us to live lives of poverty or illness or unhappiness. We are meant to live lives of great prosperity, great happiness and great health. So they would have meetings in their house, and they had a few small publications they put out, but they didn't really have the resources to, at that time, expand unity to what it is today. So in the meantime, here in the early 1920s, we had the founders of our faith. Our church was founded in 1927. Very interestingly and coincidentally, we had Hattie and Dr. Garlish. Dr. Garlish was an actual MD. He had a regular practice. And Hattie had this same epiphany, similar to what Myrtle did, where she adopted this new thought frame of thinking and living. And he, similar to Charles, became so fascinated and enthralled with this teaching that Hattie had. He actually changed his whole practice. He began doing spiritual healings, and instead of prescribing medication, he'd likely send you home with a meditation or an affirmation. And he was very successful at this because he ran it the same model as any other doctor's office, because that's all he'd known. So while this is going on, we see back in Kansas City, they're still building up unity. Charles had gone and bought a huge plot of land outside of Kansas City, about 18 miles outside of Kansas City, and he had this dream of building this large organization. He was going to have publishing houses and prayer houses and just a place for people to come and learn this message and learn that they can live these lives. They don't have to live in poverty. They don't have to live with illness. They don't have to be unhappy. And they have their daily publication, the Daily Word, which is actually used in so many other faiths. I was reading about that. Jewish people, Catholic people, just about every Protestant faith, they all refer to the Daily Word. Dr. and Hattie had gotten a hold of some of this literature, and they really embraced the faith and all the tenets that go with it. So the next time you wonder what New Thought is about, definitely you can log on. Unity has a wonderful website. They have, in most religious stores, a section on New Thought. So all that information is out there. It's available. It tells you what New Thought is about and what we as New Thought students believe. We are a New Thought faith, and again, our core belief, as one of our core beliefs as New Thought students, is that we are one with God. I am one with God. I'm reminded of this great old faith-based cartoon that I read once, and in it, a minister, he goes to visit a farmer, and he surveys the farm, and it's lush, and it's beautiful, and it's growing great, and the minister turns to the farmer and says, "It's wonderful what you and God have done with this farm." And the farmer turned back to the minister, and he said, "You know what? It is wonderful what we did, but you should have seen it when just God had it." So again, I am one with God. And what that means, because it may seem a little vague, but just like this farmer, I am one with God. That means that you cannot do it all by yourself, and God isn't going to do it without participation from you. So as you're going through this week, we also have a weekly question. So as you're going through the week, this starts out as a question, but then it becomes an affirmation. Say to yourself, I am one with God, therefore I do not inherit. I changed this up a little bit from Myrtle Fillmore's because we all have our own unique challenges in life. It could be prosperity. It could be challenges with family or loved ones. I do not inherit poverty. I do not inherit ill will with my family or my friends. I do not inherit illness. Whatever your challenge is, plug that word in and repeat this to yourself all through the week. And you're going to walk through that challenge and be as adamant and as aggressive about this as Myrtle Fillmore was, because we know it changed her life. We know in New Thought, we look around, we see so many people's lives change just by the way they think and the things they say and the way they approach it. Let go of negativity. Don't allow any I can't or this is never going to happen or that's not going to work for me. Enter your mindset, because when you do, that's what you get. If you say, I'm not going to be able to pay the rent this month, you're not going to be able to pay the rent this month. Again, I am one with God, therefore I do not inherit poverty. I do not inherit lack. I do not inherit limit. And the good news is, because we are the Good News Church, is that we are all one with God. God is with us and within us at all times, in all situations and all circumstances. We only ever need to be aware of this oneness and use it. We use it through prayer, through meditation, through affirmations to reach our highest good. And our highest good is the place that God intends us to be. So remember that as you're walking through your week and all your challenges and circumstances and situations. You are one with God, and God wants you to be in a good place. Work with Him, and you will get there.